Are cryptocurrencies that have been around for a long time just old tech now, or are they still viable? Hey, guess what? This week was Dash's 7th birthday, making it one of the older projects still around and kicking in the space. I believe Digibyte just had its 7th birthday about a few days earlier, and of course, Litecoin's been around before then, and of course, Bitcoin itself is like 12 years old by now. There's so many projects in the space at this point, including a lot of new and exciting ones. And it just seems like the older ones aren't really getting that much attention. Now, of course, Bitcoin is there. It's probably always going to be there. It's at the top. Ethereum, number 2, is also big. It's also old, I guess, by modern standards. But these are kind of more the exception rather than the rule. You do see a lot of projects that enter the top 10 somewhere around when they get created, and then eventually kind of slide out, and before you know it, hey, where are they? Oh, 5th page of CoinMarketCap. Oh wow, that went way down. So is it really worth it to try to invest in older coins rather than new and exciting projects? Well, actually that depends on a whole lot of different factors, as always. Now before we get started in this, I have to use the disclaimer of not investment advice. I'm not even telling you which ones are good or bad anyway. But even if I were giving my personal opinion, I'm not telling you to spend your hard-earned money on anything. Figure that out for yourself. Find someone else to pump a coin for you or whatever. So let's get into it. So let's get into some of the benefits first. And one of these, is one of the biggest ones in fact, is supply and ecosystem decentralization. Now most cryptocurrencies have an emission rate. There are some that just the whole pot of all the coins that will ever exist was created right in the beginning, and that's all there will ever be. But most have an emission rate, or inflation as it's called sometimes, where miners or stakers or whoever else gets coins month after month, and over time, in most cases, this inflation rate starts trending downward, and eventually you have little to no inflation left. So over a long period of time, you basically get the opportunity for these coins to get into more people's hands. Right at the beginning, the founders and whoever else was starting to mine, or whoever else were the first stakers or whatever it is, they have a giant chunk of the supply. And they could basically influence the price, and in case of governance and things like that, they can influence the whole project pretty easily. And so it's not that decentralized. But over time, more and more people get this. There's fewer and fewer big whales that represent enough to just control the whole thing. Again, that's in theory at least, that you start to see a project mature and actually become a fully decentralized system that you can actually rely on, not something where you just have a founder and a few old people that basically control the whole destiny of this thing while selling you decentralization. It actually takes a little bit of time to fulfill, and so that's one thing you have with older projects. They've been around long enough, the supply kicks out here and there, people sell things, the old guys get tired, some of them sell all their coins, new people are mining, new people are buying, and it just kind of works out a whole lot better. The same applies to the ecosystem in general. In the beginning, you might have just a couple of exchanges that hold the coins and therefore hold sway. Like if, for example, say Binance has all the coins on it, or for example, let's say something like Binance has the only viable trading pair, then everyone's going to be doing it through Binance, and they can basically dictate a lot of what happens to the coin. And if they decide to delist it, boom, it's pretty much over. Same thing with payment processors and supporting apps and other things like that. In the beginning, there's very few. Over time, it gets spread out into a lot of service providers. So then eventually you actually have a more decentralized whole ecosystem and a more rich and robust ecosystem, making the actual coin, even if the technology hadn't changed, more useful over time. Supply decentralization is a particular challenge to proof-of-stake coins, with block rewards exclusively going to current holders of the coin, which typically don't run high expenses to continue staking and have no hard-coded incentive to distribute them to new holders. Another benefit that I alluded to earlier is low inflation rate. Coin distribution rates start relatively high to basically kick out the coin, get it in as many new hands as possible in the beginning. And over time, when more and more people already have the coin, the supply's out, this starts to go down and down and down and down, and eventually goes to zero. Or if you are a coin like Monero or Ethereum, for example, it keeps on going infinitely to a very small amount though. And so over time, the inflation rate, even if the code itself hasn't changed, the inflation rate automatically lowers in a lot of these projects. Like Bitcoin has halvenings, where the inflation rate goes down by half. Some coins like Dash have a 7% or so reduction every much more often, which is a little bit more of a gradual reduction, etc., etc. And so the longer you hold on, the more valuable your coins end up being, because say you bought 50% of the supply in like the first couple months. Over time, you're going to have a much smaller piece of the total supply. And let's just say the demand for the project is the exact same, then your portion of that will go smaller, and therefore you actually lose value under that. But of course, usually the demand goes up, the price goes up, etc., and you're all good. But a lower inflation rate does make hodling, or not selling, holding on long term, a whole lot more attractive. Bitcoin once had a much higher inflation rate, making the prospect of hodling much less appealing, but now its supply dilutes much slower, making it a better savings technology. Monero went through this phase much faster, starting with a very high emission rate, but it's now comparable with Bitcoin, reversing its utility prospects in this area by the simple passage of time. And of course, let's not forget about security. Of course, general decentralization kind of helps this sort of thing, but it also helps to have a well-established ecosystem, whether it's proof of stake or proof of work. In proof of work, you have more miners, there's more technological development behind the hardware for mining, there's more big players mining, therefore it's much harder for just some random company to come in and decide to build a few specialized machines and just take over the whole market, because this has already been going on for a long time and it's much harder for new entrants to get in. And so you have security from that. Same thing with staking, right? You will have more people staking, more coins staked, probably a higher price overall, so it's harder to get in on staking. Therefore, it's harder to influence the network to, say, attack it or something. So, generally speaking, older projects tend to get higher with the security, at least with all other things being equal. Don't forget code stability. This is one of the big reasons why Bitcoin is still number one in the market cap rankings, is because its code base is very tried and true. It's been looked at and improved and ironed out for, over a decade. And a whole lot of projects actually backport to this original code base and basically copy the code with some adjustments that are tailor-made for their specific chain. And so there's a lot of eyes and things like that on this code. It works really well as far as it's very reliable and stable. Nothing too crazy is going to happen. This isn't really the same case with a new project that just starts everything from zero. And then who knows what kind of vulnerabilities could exist? Who knows what exploits you could run into, things like that. And so new projects with an entirely new code base always have to deal with that. And the older it is, the less likely it is you'll run into these kinds of problems. Iota was once a much hyped contender that used an innovative new alternative to a blockchain, a tangle. However, this untested tech produced several critical bugs, whereas Bitcoin's codebase has been well known and well tested for well over a decade at this point. Don't forget sustainability. Any project that comes out with a big wave of hype, especially if they have an ICO or other kind of initial fundraising effort, can get a lot of momentum, a lot of cool things done. Over the years, though, it's really hard to maintain that and become sustainable. So, for example, a good project that runs entirely off of donations will have to basically build up their donor network pretty well. They'll have to keep on delivering innovations and keep on generating interest and donations over time to be sustainable. So you know that this is going to be good for the long haul. And you won't really know this until a few years have passed. It's easy to pretend, or it's easy to see a big wave of interest in the beginning, but then over time the thing just kind of drops off. Also, if you have a treasury, a decentralized mechanism, for example, like Dash and Decred and other projects like that have, that basically pay for development right out of the Coinbase or the inflation, it's a lot easier to become sustainable long term. You might not see that advantage in the beginning. You might not see it till later when, other projects are going broke and some are still surviving. And finally, multi-year innovation. Just about every project out there has just some kind of a unique value proposition. They made it for a reason. It came out, whatever. And it does something cool and new. Now, over time, the odds of a project being able to do more cool and new things over time goes down. Only a few can keep on doing innovation after innovation after innovation, keeping on evolving. And that's a very good sign that this is something that's going to work out, because you could come out with a brand new project that does all kinds of new things that are pretty awesome. But then that's all they manage to do. Over time, they just can't really replicate those successes. And so then if you just go by new project innovations, you have an innovation here, one there, one there, one there. Some of them might build on each other, but by investing in or using or building a company around or running infrastructure of one particular project, that doesn't transfer to all these other innovations that crop up in new projects. It's only one that can consistently create its own innovations over and over and over. and of course adapt innovations from other projects that they see, but just put them all in the same thing that actually carries over. Now let's look at some of the challenges behind older cryptocurrencies. First off is, of course, old tech. When you have a technological product, things advance very quickly. And if you don't advance with it, you're kind of stuck and you start to become uncompetitive. Now, of course, we talked about the ability to consistently innovate. Sometimes, though, you are built on old technology and you can't just rebuild the whole thing from scratch. You might as well just start a new product. And in the meantime, someone else is starting one from scratch that just works perfectly from the get-go. So there's always a risk of running old things and just not remaining competitive in the future. And of course, we have, unfortunately, all too familiar founder fatigue or changing of the guard. It's easy to get one person or one team that's really good at their job that come in and do some cool stuff. And then over time, they move on from the project or they get tired or whatever. And then the project just does not really survive past the founder exiting. That's kind of a huge problem. And so projects that are able to successfully reboot and keep going despite having completely new people running it later, that's a rare thing. And if you don't have one of those, you could be in for a world of hurt. Dan Larimer is the driving force behind many projects including BitShares, Steem, and EOS, and has become infamous for project hopping, with his former creations declining after his departure. After he recently announced he is leaving EOS, one is left to wonder if the same thing will happen again. Another one that hasn't really come up yet, because even the oldest blockchain projects aren't really that old, is the block reward running out. And remember I mentioned the whole inflation thing before? Well, eventually that goes down to almost nothing. That worked as a subsidy for mining or staking or development or whatever else to just sort of kickstart it and keep it going. Eventually, all this is supposed to be replaced, or at least mostly replaced, by fees. And fees only come in if there's a lot of people using this for practical reasons and they're willing to pay it. And of course, if you don't have that amount of fee income coming in, then eventually the whole project can just fall apart because there's no more free money anymore. The coins are valuable because they're not being inflated a bunch, but then they're not secure because you can't really get enough mining power to keep them secure just on fees, and then they sputter out eventually. And unfortunately, last one, hype cycle fade. Everything comes in with a new burst of energy that people ride on. They think this is going to be great, it's going to work forever, but over time just people stop caring anymore. And then something that worked entirely on speculation, all of a sudden the speculation goes, and even though the product keeps getting better and better, it's hard to get people's interest back in the project. There's something like Bitcoin or Ethereum that have really gotten ahead of the game, and it's going to be really hard for them to actually sink at this point because they just got so far ahead and have built so many new things on it. It's going to be hard to get out of people's minds, so anything new and cool you do, including scope and price, is going to be noticed by everyone. For smaller projects, especially when you go far down the market cap rankings, it's just really hard to get that hype back, especially if you don't come out with something new and awesome and splashy. So ultimately, the message in all this is evolve or die. Older projects have a bunch of advantages, but if they don't keep up with the times, they don't keep growing, they're going to just fall by the wayside. We've seen a bunch of projects that have kind of done this, and they're kind of in the history books now. They're not really current anymore. People aren't really investing in them. They're not really going to make it anywhere except for some, big miracle. Namecoin, Feathercoin, Peercoin, NXT, BitShares, and others all at one point occupied prominent market cap rankings and were considered serious contenders. Now they appear to be on their way out the door as important footnotes in blockchain history. Now let's look at a few projects that have actually done better than this and have continued to be in the modern discussion based on all the innovations they've continued to produce over the years, or a variety of other factors. Digibyte has evolved its mining technology several times to accommodate several different mining algorithms and avoid mining pools in order to achieve decentralization, has improved its transaction speed, and has added secure authentication functionality and a tokenized asset layer, remaining in the top coins conversation today. Dogecoin, despite starting as a joke and fading from prominence with no real development to speak of over the years, has remained a fixture in the space and is still used a lot, particularly for exchange-to-exchange transfers. Dash went from an initial one-trick pony with a CoinJoin-based privacy function to developing universal instant transaction settlement, high-level blockchain security, decentralized development funding, decentralized governance, and now is in the process of releasing a decentralized application platform based around decentralized digital identities. Litecoin was headed to the dustbin of crypto history, but got a renewed push with the listing on Coinbase and pursued popular developments of SegWit and Lightning, and now Mimblewimble privacy enhancements to remain in the conversation today. Monero overcame some serious usability and scaling issues, as well as some privacy exploits, to become much more usable and reliable today, pulling ahead of other newer competitors to solidly claim the privacy market niche. And of course, Library came from a skeleton of a blockchain-based content network slid far down the market cap pages to forgotten territory to build some great and actually usable services on top of it, gain millions of users, and claw back some of its value. Library promises to be one of the very top, if not the top, decentralized content platform now, only bolstered by a wave of recent tech censorship. So there you have it. We're done here. Which projects do you know of that you really value a lot that are kind of old and have been around for a while? Please let me know. Comments, donation messages, whatever. Let me know. I'll talk about them. I'll give them a shout out. I'll research them if they're cool enough and maybe even do another video on them. So thanks everyone for watching, and I will see you next time.